We know the joy of giving is its own reward. But who says you can't get something for yourself, too? Now when you buy Vanilla MasterCard gift cards, you can enter to win one of over 10 prizes every week for 10 weeks, including a grand prize of $10,000 in Vanilla gift cards. So get gifting and start sharing the delight for more chances to win. Go to get-gifting.com to learn more and enter for your chance to win. Cards are issued by the Bancorp Bank and MetaBank, members FDIC, pursuant to license by MasterCard International Incorporated, and may be used in the U.S. everywhere debit MasterCard is accepted. Terms and conditions apply. Cards distributed and serviced by Income Financial Services, Inc., which is licensed as a money transmitter by the New York State Department of Financial Services, and MLS ID number 912772.
I'll say this for him, he's consistent.
Well, he's been so consistent all year.
Not the taste, consistency.
Consistently, yes.
Consistency! Thanks, losers.
And we welcome you back to another edition of the Fantasy Football Consistency Show. We are heading into Week 12, last week of the bye weeks. Praise the Lord. Bad week, man. Chargers, Chiefs, Cardinals. Man, this is a rough week if you have a lot of the players that I do, which I do. Surprising, I know. But anyway, welcome again to this week. We have two amazing special guests this week. Ron Rigney had to go to work tonight, which is all cool because, you know, guys got to work. But he got to call in a little bit late. So I reached out and I brought in two of my favorite fantasy footballer guys out there. You know them as Chris Allen and Jeremy Browand. Gentlemen, welcome to the show, and happy to have you guys here talking some consistency with me this week. How you guys been?
Great. Thanks for having us, man. Appreciate this.
Yeah, of course, man. I think, Thursday night, football's playing tonight already, but it looks like the game is kind of boring, I guess, from a fantasy standpoint. So I guess we're not missing too much, but happy to be on the pod with you guys.
Yeah, so Chris, you come to us from multiple places, 4for4, NumberFire, Sports Crew Network, and, of course, Dynasty, Owner's Manual. You and I and Jeremy all got to hang out at the Fantasy Football Expo, which was awesome. So we appreciate you coming in for that, and I know we'll see you again. And, Jeremy, you come from Dynasty Football Factory at Dynasty Trades HQ, and, of course, chief editor, with a hyphen, of course, at Devy Watch. Both of you can be found on Twitter, Jeremy at DFF_Madman, and Chris Allen at Chris Allen FFWX. So, guys, we are also in a league together, which has been a very competitive league so far. It's the Ohio DFF Dynasty Fantasy Football. All of us are from Ohio. We all met in Columbus. Jeremy was a fine host. We had a great time together. So how are you guys feeling about your teams heading as we head towards the playoffs? I'm 6-5. I think I'm in third place because of points. We won't get into Jeremy and I's trade we should have made, but that was a long story.
We could have, yes.
We could have made, and we would have been a lot better off. At least I think I would have been. Anyway, but how you guys feeling about your teams?
I'm already looking towards 2020. All right, I'm not doing too well. It's kind of been something of a lost season for me because, I drafted Cam Newton. Ooh. And that didn't really work out the way that I had hoped it would. And so with a couple other injuries on my squad, I think I have Marlon Mack on my team, James Conner on my team. Things didn't really work out this year. So
that's what's nice about Dynasty, right? You start playing for next year.
Make a couple of trades. And,
always hope for the future. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm not really different than you, and it's similar. I drafted Baker Mayfield as my second quarterback. It's a super flex. Essentially, right. I have Deshaun Watson. That's perfect. I'm happy with that.
You have Deshaun Watson now.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I have him now after the trade. But before that, just a bit of flux. I didn't. My team really wasn't. It was hovering at what. I think we were all tied at one point, 5 or 6 teams, and I think that's still the case with the standings. I have Watson and Mayfield in the Superflex. Ezekiel Elliott and Austin Eckler have been carrying me there at running back. But I don't feel strong this season with this team, and I decided while I could go to try to make the playoffs, it's you in points, Scott Connor, me, and 2 other teams, all 5 of us tied at 6-5 in third place, basically a 3-way tie. And so I really thought that it was maybe not likely I'd make the playoffs, or uncertain. So I wanted to shake my team up a little bit, get some players that I liked better than I had before. And so I made a move, and I might still make the playoffs or sneak in there, but I was really like Chris, looking more toward next year and positioning myself to compete better next year.
Gotcha. All right, so it should be fun here down the stretch. We have this week and next week, then we start playoffs, 14?
I think so,
I believe so, yeah.
And it's top 6, right?
I should know this. I should know this.
You should know this since you are the commissioner, but I'm just asking.
Right.
Co-commish, but yeah. It's 6, and it's 2 weeks, yep.
Yeah, so it's going to be do or dies here for the next couple of weeks with everybody. So anyway, as always, shout out to the sponsors. Of course, we are part of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network, and we thank them for being a part of that. As always, you can listen to all kinds of great podcasts on that network. Everything you need to learn from, Dynasty to consistency in fantasy football to DFS to there's actually one all on the Ravens. If you're a big Ravens fan, there's the Purple Rain, which I think is a great name, and it's REIGN. So Purple Rain Podcast. I love the name. But it's all about the purple and black in Baltimore. So pretty cool. I haven't listened to the show, but the name got me right off the bat. But anyway, so we're part of that. As always, we'd like to thank our sponsor, FantasyGo.com. If you need some help for your playoff run, I got somebody else just reached out to me this week and hired me to help them with their playoff run to join FantasyGo.com. It's a great site. Link it up with your Yahoo League, and we can actually get right into your site and see your waiver wires, your rosters, all that kind of cool stuff. So we're there for you as well. And if you're not on Yahoo, that's okay. You can use the concierge mode, they call it, and you can just basically share screenshots, and we can still help you with regardless of what league you're in. So definitely check that out, FantasyGo.com. All right, here we go. Gentlemen, you have your consistency reports in hand. Let's take a look at them. And I don't know. I mean, you guys, I don't know how much you follow this actual stuff and you read my stuff, but that's fine. But you look at these numbers, and every time I show this to somebody new to the system, they just look at that and go, wait a minute, who's up there? Josh Allen, 80% consistent. How in the world could that be happening? They're not surprised. Lamar. They're not surprised Lamar Jackson. Everybody knows Lamar Jackson's been great. They may be a little surprised by Dak Prescott at 90%. But Josh Allen at 80% is really quite amazing when you realize that he's ahead of Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Matt Ryan, Russell Wilson, on and on and on. But he's getting it done with his legs. He's getting it done in the air as well. Of course, it doesn't hurt when you get to play the Miami Dolphins twice a year, as evident last week when he was the top fantasy quarterback. But of what you've seen, guys, of Josh Allen, and maybe you have some shares of him in some of your leagues, are you seeing that going to continue? His schedule gets pretty tough after this. I mean, he starts playing Denver and New England and those kind of teams. So I'm wondering, can he still keep that up because of his legs? He can certainly make some things happen on the ground. Do you see the consistency continue with Josh Allen going forward? I'll go to Chris.
I mean, I'd be surprised. I mean, I guess I'd be somewhat surprised to see the consistency keep up just for some of those defensive matchups that you just mentioned. I mean, they've got, like you mentioned, he's got some pretty tough schedule down the stretch. And like while he did pop against the Dolphins, I think he also played well against Washington. But yeah, I mean, going up against he's got the Ravens. I see the Steelers still on the schedule.
At Dallas
and the Patriots. Yeah, right. Dallas. Well, I don't know about Dallas. I mean, because they just let Jeff Driscoll put up 26, 27 points against them.
They made him look like a perennial All-Pro. It was crazy.
Right. So
he could have his moments.
He could have a couple of decent matchups, but it's those ones against those. I mean, those I guess top tier defenses. I mean, the Ravens, the Steelers have come on fairly well since the trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick, and then New England. I mean, it's very hard. I mean, I think they've been limiting quarterbacks pretty much all season. So But I think the one thing that I guess we could say for Josh Allen, especially when they go to play against New England, one, I guess during that, because they already played New England once, and in that game they took them it was 16-10 was the final score.
Right.
So at least the two teams were able to go, I guess, blow for blow until the end of the game. But also, I guess to Josh Allen's credit, the only type of quarterback or quarterback archetype that's been able to actually push their defense was an athletic quarterback in Lamar Jackson. So it's possible if Sean McDermott were to take that tape and try and apply anything that he can to New England's defense's weakness to what Josh Allen can do and try and mold him into that, it's possible that he can actually succeed a bit more against New England. But that's all the way till, I think they don't play them until week 16. So
right, that's the killer, is that's championship week. But the way I look at things too is, if, let's say your team, you drafted a quarterback. Let's say you drafted a Cam Newton, like you guys had mentioned. Maybe you got Josh Allen as your backup. He might be starting for you, but you probably might be playing matchups with some other quarterback you got off the waiver wire or made a trade for. So you're probably doing some matching up anyway. So that just, maybe you start him against the Denvers and the Dallases and, maybe even Baltimore at home, because that could be more of a shootout than anything. But it is certainly would be interesting. It's definitely going to get tougher for that stretch run during the playoffs. All right, so let's move down into the 60 and 70% ranges. We got, of course, the guys we talked to, the studs, Mahomes, Watson, Ryan, but some surprises in there as well. Kyler Murray having a hell of a rookie season. I do an article every year for the Guide, and it's also on the website about rookies and consistency. And, quarterbacks, there's only been about 5 or 6 quarterbacks over the last, since I think it's 2010 I started tracking it. So almost 10 years now. And there's only been 5 or 6 quarterbacks that have been over 60% consistent in their rookie season. It looks like Kyler Murray is certainly well on his way to breaking that and being one of those few. And, again, his schedule looks a little interesting. I mean, you got a bye week this week, but they have 3 straight home games: the Rams, the Steelers, and the Browns. Week 16 at Seattle. I mean, not a terrible schedule, but again, he gets the job done with his legs and his arm. Do you see consistency continuing with that? Jeremy, I'll go to you first and get your thoughts.
I'm not worried about the consistency. If I have Kyler Murray, I paid a pretty hefty price to get him. It's likely a super flex league if I'm worried about it at all.
Right.
And I'm starting 2 quarterbacks. And so, I'm going to roll him out every week. I am surprised at how consistent he's been. Josh Allen, even more so, I wouldn't have expected. Right. And I wanted to say, it's funny, Josh Allen, I have no shares of him across 30 Dynasty leagues. Where I did own him, I traded him, and he's so good in fantasy football. I'm a little upset. But Kyler Murray, unbelievable job as a rookie. And I think, that offense is really well suited for him, handpicked by Cliff Kingsbury. That's, I think you have to start him if you have him. I mean, do you want to not start? Who are you going to start over him? And then if you don't start him, what are you going to do to your own, butt? You're going to kick yourself if he has a great game again. So right. I'm not worried about the schedule the rest of the way for Kyler Murray. I think he's just getting better every week. So unless I have another great quarterback, I wouldn't even consider benching that kid.
Gotcha. Chris, what are your thoughts on Kyler Murray going forward?
No, I think I'd agree with what Jeremy's analysis. I mean, passing wise, I think you've seen flashes of what he really can be as he starts to get more acclimated to the NFL. I mean, just throwing on a rope. I mean, just laser accuracy, and also the rushing. I mean, that was one of the big upsides. I mean, for a player of his archetype, and 30 yards rushing, I think, for the past 3 games. And I don't really see any defense that has at least the athleticism to really keep up with that. If he was able to put up, I think, 67-1 against San Francisco, and we all know that their defense has been one of the more athletic defenses, despite having all of their injuries. So I think that going forward, I mean, if you have Kyler Murray, you drafted him, I mean, you're probably going to hold him down the stretch, and I think it should work out.
Right. All right, so let's look at some quarterbacks, especially some big-name quarterbacks. I'm talking probably quarterbacks who were drafted as your QB1 at 50% or below consistency so far this year. Carson Wentz, Baker Mayfield, Aaron Rodgers, who else? maybe Kirk Cousins, maybe even Phillip Rivers. But all these guys down there at 50% and below. I have Mayfield I have some shares of Mayfield. It's been painful. And you throw in the fact that we're all Browns fans, which I think most of us here are Browns fans. It's been rough. But Aaron Rodgers, luckily, I didn't get too many shares of Aaron Rodgers. I guess I was kind of looking at I was really more high on Wentz and Mayfield, and that's really not been going well for me. But what are your guys' thoughts on these three guys, especially let's say Wentz, Mayfield, and Rodgers? And do you see improvement? I mean, at this point, if you're sitting with, and I'm sure there's teams that have this, Mayfield and Kyler Murray, or Carson Wentz and Josh Allen, or Aaron Rodgers and probably Dak Prescott maybe as their backup. Man, I mean, how do you make those decisions every week? And what would you do if you have to start those guys, or you're looking at that kind of matchup every week? Do you say, oh, well, it's got to be good for Aaron Rodgers this week and put him in and get 16 points instead of 30 that you could have got from Josh Allen? What are your guys' thoughts? I'll go to you, Chris. Of those guys, who do you think will be consistent for the stretch run?
If there was anybody that could probably pull off something like that, my gut feel is that it would be Aaron Rodgers. And I think most of his woes throughout the season is that they just haven't been able to find a reliable wide receiver to step up in that offense. I mean, they were throwing out, who was it, Geronimo Allison one week. It was Marquez Valdez-Scantling another week. It was, I think, Alan Lazard now has really kind of emerged as that wide receiver 2. And so with Devontae Adams being injured for, I think it was at least 2-3 weeks, and then we've got the ghost of Jimmy Graham out there running routes. I mean, really, they didn't have too many reliable receivers for him to connect with. So I think having Devontae Adams back, I don't think their schedule is all too concerning. I know this week, I believe they're playing San Francisco this week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I thought so. Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, so that is something of a concern. But otherwise, I think if I had to look at any of those other guys that are kind of sitting down there, I think Rodgers has the best chance to turn things around.
Totally agree.
Same.
Yeah.
I think you have to do that. And depending on what league you're in, I'm not worried about Baker Mayfield or Carson Wentz long term, in dynasty leagues, which I play a lot in. But Rodgers this year, I think you have to bank on him for sure. I wouldn't be concerned starting him. And as my second quarterback, oh, come on.
Yeah, right. Yeah, 2 quarterback leagues, it's one thing. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's move to the running back situation, running back center list here. Dalvin Cook at the top, second in total points, 100% consistent. You may be surprised to see Leonard Fournette, unless you have him in some of your leagues, at a perfect 100% as well, but only 8th in total points. Big gap between him and Dalvin Cook between 2nd and 8th. But obviously nobody has been better, than Christian McCaffrey this year. I think I said this week in the article I wrote for Big Guy Fantasy Sports was the fact that Christian McCaffrey is having a Patrick Mahomes year because he's so far ahead of everybody else in total points that it's just not fair. He's at almost 300 points through 10 games. We still have 6 more games. He's at 300 points. Most of these guys will be ecstatic if they can get over. Yeah. If they hit 300 points for the season, he's 0.4 away. And remember, he had a week where he only had 7.3 fantasy points. I think it was week 2. So that means he had 292 in 9 games.
Fantasy force.
Yeah, like I said, he's 42 points ahead of second place. The gap between him and 12th, which would be your last RB1, is 149 points, almost 150 points, almost double. Just incredible.
Yeah, so, it's the amount of points that Alvin Kamara has right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you combine Alvin Kamara, who's 13th in total points, and Le'Veon Bell, you still not ahead of Christian McCaffrey by himself.
It's ridiculous. Just think about this past week. So this past week, when Kyle Allen threw 4 touchdowns, the team put up a total of 3 points.
No, 4 interceptions.
Yeah, 4 interceptions, but the team put up just 3 points total. Right. Christian McCaffrey still had almost 190 yards, 190 scrimmage yards.
Right.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Right, and 10 receptions to go along with it in a PPR. It's just out of control. So I don't think we need to expound on how good we think Christian McCaffrey is, but
he's pretty good.
Yeah, he's not bad. As we move down into the 90% and 80% range. We got guys we expect to see there. And I think, one of the things I've talked about this year on the show pretty much every week is how the quarterbacks and the wide receivers and the tight ends are kind of a mess when it comes to consistency and the big names being at the top where they should be. And then, you see some surprises. We already looked at the quarterbacks, and you don't see Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson at the top of the list in consistency this year. They're there in total points somewhat, but not. But at least running backs has pretty much stayed not badly in check. Ezekiel Elliott's up there, Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Le'Veon Bell. I mean, they're all 70% or above. This is what we expect out of those guys. That's why we draft them where we draft them. Now, there are some surprises in there, like Leonard Fournette. I don't think anybody expected him to be that good this year. Right. And plus, we all expected Leonard Fournette. We know Leonard Fournette's good. We were just waiting for Leonard Fournette to be stupid, and he hasn't done it. I've mentioned him in the same realm of being a ticking time bomb. Like, I'm waiting for him to go off. Like, when is he going to blow up? But
any week.
But he's so quiet. He's not saying a word. You don't hear a peep out of him. He just goes out and performs every week.
Now, does his job, and he's consistent at it.
Now, I know damn well next year I'm going to draft the crap out of this guy because of his consistency. And in week 2, he's going to go Myles Garrett on somebody and beat them senseless with their helmet, and we won't see him again the rest of the year. I just know it.
Right.
It's going to come back and bite me. So let's go back to reality. Like I said, so, some of the surprises in that group, James White, 89%. Last year, James White had like 7 out of 8 quality games or clutch games in the first 8 weeks. Looked like he was going to be, a fantasy god. Sony Michel got healthy. Rest of the year, didn't hear much from him at all.
That was odd, too, because White is such a great asset in the passing game, and that's honestly, they need him this year in the passing game, and he's been even more prolific there. Right. So I can understand why he's been consistent. Every week he's getting targeted.
Right. But the thing was, we didn't expect it because we saw at the end of last year and the Super Bowl how well Sony Michel was running. We all drafted Sony Michel in the second round or third round or fourth round as our RB2, expected him to put up very solid numbers like he was getting through the playoffs and the Super Bowl. And boom, we went right back to James White being the guy, and Sony Michel, I forget how
pedestrian,
bad
for sure.
Yeah, at best. Austin Eckler has filled in nicely for Melvin Gordon and has stayed consistent even with Melvin Gordon in there. So that's been nice. Let's look at the 70% range. Chris Carson was certainly one of my favorites. Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, Connor, and Ingram. Of that group, who to you guys is probably the most surprising to be either this high or this low based on what you thought you expected out of that person? So, Jeremy, we'll start with you.
Good question. I'm not surprised by Chris Carson being where he is. He's been a value. He's been a value play, a value pick. He hasn't been expensive, and he tends to outperform what you pay for him and what he costs you. I don't know. I think I did not necessarily expect it. I figured a down year. I think everyone expected a little bit more out of Le'Veon Bell, that he's, right there with Josh Jacobs behind him in points, equally consistent. It's the Jets and they've had some issues and it's a new coach, but that he isn't a little higher on this list, a bit concerning. I expected a little more also out of Mark Ingram too, But I mean, I'm not completely surprised by any of those. I'm surprised that Josh Jacobs is that high. A lot of people were high on him coming out of the draft. I was not. I mean, I thought he was capable, and they were really going to use him in Oakland. But I think seeing that he's 70% consistent and the number of fantasy points, he's really done well for himself. So none of it's shocking, but those are a couple of things that I picked up on in my leagues.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Jeremy on the Mark Ingram point. I don't think I've seen him above 50% snap share, like probably in the last 3 or 4 weeks, because he's been sharing time with Gus Edwards. I mean, Justice Hill's been kind of sprinkled in there as well. And then Lamar Jackson doing his thing. It just seemed kind of surprising to see him up that high. I mean, especially when compared, he's sitting behind Todd Gurley, but I guess with Todd Gurley's apparent workload they have been using Darrell Henderson all that much, and Malcolm Brown, I think he just came back. I think it was his first game back this past week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. But either way, that one was kind of surprising. I would have expected Mark Ingram to be maybe just a tad bit lower, but yeah, everything else I think kind of falls in line with my expectations.
Right. All right, so let's move on to the wide receivers, because basically there isn't too many top players below 50% in the running backs. As I said, it's kind of in check to what you would expect, but wide receivers, not so much. At the top of the list, we do have at 100% consistent Michael Thomas having a great year, 237 points. Again, he's got about a 38-point lead on the number 2 scorer in the league, Mike Evans, at 199.
I'm not surprised by that. The best wide receiver in the NFL, Michael Thomas. Totally not surprised by him at the top of your list.
Well, because
can't guard Mike.
Where is he from?
Ohio State University.
The Ohio State University. You're welcome. But again, just like quarterbacks, you start going past number 1, and you start seeing names that you do not expect to be sitting at the top of the wide receiver list. Now, granted, some of them are more consistency driven because they have a higher consistency rating this year, but not as much in points, because one of them, which is Golden Tate, has only played in 6 games, but he's 5 out of 6 in the games he's played, 83%. But just like our boy Josh Allen is near the top of the quarterbacks, his teammate John Brown is at 90% consistent, 14th in total points. At last week's show, and if you can go back and listen to it if you'd like, because it's on demand, you can get it on Spreaker.
Okay.
But I mentioned in that show, I said, John Brown was, 8 out of 9 going into last week. But his total points, I think he was around 18th or 19th, maybe even 20th. And I said, he's not jumping out at people because he hasn't had that big week that we expected John Brown to have. I mean, a lot of us probably thought more John Brown was kind of in the Deshaun Jackson mode of, he'll have a couple big games and then he'll fall off the face of the earth, and a couple big games. And, at the end of the year, he's 50% consistent and he's 15th in total points. John Brown has actually been consistent, putting up 12 to 15 a week, but he hadn't had that big week, and then boom, he blew up. So, John Brown, you're welcome. Nice. But again, we have a tougher schedule coming up. My thoughts are that he's probably going to take a little bit of a dive after this because the teams are going to start focusing on him. There's really not a strong number 2 there. You've got Cole Beasley and Dawson Knox at tight end. Some decent players, but nothing to speak home about. But of these 2 guys, John Brown and Golden Tate, what are your guys' thoughts on those 2 going forward? Do you see their consistency continuing? And especially if you're in a dynasty league and that kind of stuff, is this is John Brown a guy that, you should go after now while people may, or is it too late because, he had his blow up week. Now everybody loves him.
No, I think you go after John Brown. I like him fine. The one that stands out to me is Golden Tate. I know he missed the games and he came back. He's one of my favorite receivers, and I don't have any affinity for him other than I just love watching him play football. The college he went to, that's not me. The team he was on, that wasn't me. Just the way he plays football, the yards after contact that he's able to generate. yards after catching the ball. He's able to play in the slot and outside. I think he's one of the best, fine-tuned wide receivers in the NFL. And he's not a big guy, and so he does get banged around. He's just really good at football and consistently good, obviously.
Right.
We
and
see
he
that
was
right
consistent
now.
in Detroit. I mean,
Yeah,
when him and Marvin Jones were there together, when Stafford was healthy, I mean, Golden Tate was certainly one of the more consistent NFL receivers. So
and always a value. Always
right.
a value. He didn't cost as much as you'd expect given the performance and production that he generated. So he's someone that I would always advocate you trade for, get, somehow acquire. John Brown, not as much, but I do like him as well. But Golden Tate's the one that stands out on this list because of his talent to me.
All right, Chris, I'm going to go to you, but for a different question. We're going to skip the next group because the next group is guys we kind of thought we were going to see. Unless did you want to comment? Do I need?
No. I think Jeremy was spot on right there. I love seeing Smokey Brown actually succeeding. Now I wish the only thing that I do wish was that he had been able to stay in Baltimore and play with Lamar Jackson, or even beforehand if he'd been able to stay in Arizona and play with Kyler Murray.
Oh, yeah, that would have been great.
Yeah, right.
That would have been great.
Well, but they're all big-armed guys. I mean, they all have, they all have the ability to throw deep. I mean, Josh Allen may not be able to hit the broadside of a barn if it's standing in front of me at times, but but he can throw it deep. There's no question about that. So, all right, so we're going to move down the list a little bit here. So we know these guys should have been up near the top. Chris Godwin, Tyler Lockett, DeAndre Hopkins, Julian Edelman, Julio Jones. Got it. No problems. But then it's still at 80% consistent. We have three guys. Two of them, I think, dynasty players, dynasty guys like you guys definitely were in on Cortland Sutton and DJ Moore as up-and-coming players, coming into their second, third years. No questions asked. But the guy at the bottom of the 80% list, did you guys all literally have your mouths hit the floor like a bad comic strip where you went, wait a minute, is that who I think it is? Yes, folks, it is. At 80% consistent for the season, 24th in total points, is our preseason hype favorite, Devontae Parker. And
I mean,
just saying the fact that Devontae Parker is tied with DeAndre Hopkins, Julian Edelman, Julio Jones at 80% consistent. If somebody would have made that bet with you at the beginning of the season and you could put whatever you wanted to put up, your house, your life savings, your your life in general, you would have bet the farm and more that there was no way this was going to happen.
Yeah, that's the guy that jumps out of this.
There it is.
Absolutely. I mean, that's easily the guy that jumps out to me because, I mean, who would have thought that, especially at the beginning of this year when we knew that it was going to be Josh Rosen and, I wasn't all too big on Preston Williams, at least coming into this season. I don't know if you guys were or not, but even so, I mean, just looking at the Miami Dolphins as a franchise, I mean, we all kind of saw that it was the whole tank for Tua type thing,
right.
And investing in that team wasn't really one that I felt like doing. Right. But now, I mean, looking at it, that is completely changed now because, I mean, Fitzmagic is now back in the mix,
right? Yeah,
and there is no Preston Williams. Mike Gesicki isn't doing much of anything. Nope. So now you're really just left with Devontae Parker. And I guess Allen Hurns is there too.
Right.
But 26 targets over the past 3 weeks. I mean, he's actually been. I mean, last week he didn't even need a touchdown in order to make value.
Right.
I think he had 7 for 130 or something close to that. So it's I have to buy in at this point. I mean,
here's the other reason to buy in. And if you're listening, folks out there, you need to do this right now. Find the owner in your league who has Parker. And get him for your playoff. If you have a chance for the playoffs, or you're in the playoffs, go get Devontae Parker. And I'll tell you why. Listen to this schedule, kids. Cleveland this week, Philadelphia, New York Jets, New York Giants, Cincinnati Bengals. You can't find an easier schedule unless the Dolphins were playing the Dolphins every week.
Right.
That's the only way it could be any easier.
That's it.
So go get Devontae Parker for your fantasy run. I know I'm going to starting as soon as this show's over because I did not see the schedule until now.
Right.
So, I traded a second-round pick for a late second-round pick in next year's, in a Dynasty league, of course, but in the 2020 draft.
Who's got him in our
second
league?
Round, Scott Connor. Yeah, he traded Devontae Parker for a second, and that was one of the moves I made.
You have him now?
Yeah, not just to, help me make the playoffs and perhaps, assist my team this year. But I wanted him going forward, and I thought at the cost of a second.
Man. See,
well done.
This is why you're in first place in the pros versus Joe's, and I'm not anymore.
No, Matt Stafford broke his back, and that was my second quarterback. So I'm I keep falling, since Stafford got hurt.
Oh,
I
really?
won't win.
That hurts. Yeah. All right, so we got about 10 minutes left. So let's move down the list. I'll just kind of ask you guys who, as you get into the 70% and down, are maybe disappointments or surprises that they're that high at this point of the year in the 70% and below. We'll say, that first page kind of thing.
I would say at least one of the disappointments, because we were just talking about DJ Moore a minute ago, one of those guys that were kind of high up there in consistency, but his teammate Curtis Samuel, down there at 50%. It's just been something of a disappointing season. And you can make excuses for not having Cam and just kind of the offensive line hasn't played all that well. And it's just been kind of a disappointing season for the Panthers in general. But with DJ Moore still playing at a pretty high level, Greg Olsen has been serviceable from the tight end, as a tight end position. We already talked about how great Christian McCaffrey is. I would have hoped that Samuel at least would have been a little bit better as an ancillary player, but man, it just really hasn't worked out for him in 2019 so far.
I think the surprising thing, not surprising because I was high on Curtis Samuel as you were, Chris. I had him in my top 36. And I don't think a lot of analysts, experts out there had him in the top 36, and I did. I suppose you did too. Yeah. But he is still 30th in total points. So it hasn't been it might be disappointing from my standpoint because I had kind of put in my consistency guide and stuff that said that DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel were basically the same player, but you could get Curtis Samuel 4 or 5 rounds later, and that was my point, saying that they both were pretty good.
Both assets to own for sure, yeah.
Right. And, when you look at the total points, DJ Moore is 147, Curtis Samuel is 119. That's only a 30-point difference. You divide that by 10 games, that's only 3 points a game difference. So, like you said, with the change in quarterback and Kyle Allen kind of getting his feet wet, Curtis Samuel certainly has had some good games, but, I certainly still feel comfortable that he's having a year that I expected, which was being a top 36. So I'm definitely
and still getting plenty of opportunity in that offense too.
Right, exactly.
And I can see some of these players, being inconsistent, even though they have a decent amount of fantasy points and they're, some of the more sought after receivers in leagues. The one thing that surprises me is that DJ Chark. He's at 60% consistency, and the reason that surprises me is how high he is on almost all the lists. Like you could literally look up any statistic: air yards, fantasy points per target, red zone targets, total targets, all that stuff. And he's in the top 15 wide receivers, top 10 in some cases. He's tied for the league lead in touchdowns before this week at 8 touchdowns, and the drop rate, like his percentage is in up there with Julio Jones, Larry Fitzgerald, Marvin Jones, guys that we know are really good receivers, have great hands. It's surprising that he doesn't have greater consistency. And I know he's a young guy, raw, the rookie quarterback, Foles coming back in, some things going on, that could feed into that consistency. But yeah, that surprises me. I'd expect him to be a little bit more consistent.
Yeah, he's 60-70%, and he's had some bad games. He had a 7.2, a 7.3, and an 8.4. So he's had 3 below 10, and then he has a 10.3. Well, so the way the system works in my system is that it keeps a running calculating of that fantasy factor or clutch factor. Well, the clutch factor right now is 10.32. So if it drops again next week and goes back down to like 10-2-5, he'll get that clutch game back. He'll be 70%, and it won't be as bad as you think. So, but I get your point. So
yeah,
anyway.
I mean, seeing DK Metcalf is more consistent than DJ Chark as a rookie. Metcalf, that's surprising is all.
Right, and like you said, it may change where Chark will be right there with him, but yeah, he actually was up there quite a bit. He's just had a drop off here too, but still 5th in total points, nothing to sneeze at. Certainly been putting up some great numbers. So, all right, so let's move on to the from the wide receivers to the disaster that we like to call tight ends. Folks, there are only 9 tight ends that are over 56% consistent. That's basically half the games. Of those 9, two of them, well, 3 of them have missed significant amount of games over the last few weeks and have been worthless to us. You know who you are: Austin Hooper, Evan Ingram, and George Kittle.
Yes.
So now we're down to 6: Kelsey, Hunter Henry, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, and Zach Ertz. That's it. That's all we can rely on right now on a consistent basis in the world of fantasy football. If you don't have one of those 6, you are scrambling week after week trying to decide, is it Greg Olsen? Do I put in Jared Cook? How about Darren Fells? Hey, Gerald Everett was hot for 3 weeks. Well, Brian Griffin, he's been hot for 3 weeks. I mean, it's just been an absolute mess. We only have about 5 minutes. We could spend 5 hours talking about this disaster. That is tight ends. Guys, let's just look at, you guys pick some off the list and jump in wherever you want, whether it's Chris or Jeremy.
The only thing I wanted to say, and I'm sure Chris is going to have some really astute observations, is just that my strategy is always to load up on tight ends because I hate to stream them. And this season is forcing you to stream them, even if you don't want to, and even if you planned ahead. But, looking at this season and the guys at the top, my players that I like, Kelsey and Kittle, who doesn't like them, Andrews, Hooper especially, wasn't that high on Ingram and Henry, but always after those guys, this just basically reinforces my opinion to go after, Ertz and Kittle and Hooper and Kelsey and the guys that are consistent from year to year and are top tight ends, because it's going to benefit your team, down the stretch, and you have an asset to trade if you have a couple of them. I try not to have a team where I don't have one of the top tight ends or I have 2, middle guys, but I cannot stand trying to figure out who to start at tight end. It is the most maddening experience of all time, and this year is just even capital.
I think this year is the worst. Do you agree?
It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, it really wouldn't surprise me, because what do you at least from a streaming standpoint, I know that guys like JJ Zacharias and Denny Carter, all those guys that that do streaming essentially for a living. I mean, this is something that they preach year in and year out, that you can probably find a guy off the waiver wire that can fit in. But at the same time, I mean, if they don't wind up hitting and you're sitting there staring at that 0 or 2-3 points at the end of your week, and you're just like, what am I supposed to do? I mean, how, like, from a strategy standpoint, like, how are you supposed to improve on doing that? Because I guess the way that it works, I mean, is supposed to be that the rest of your team's supposed to carry you, and if you can, like, stream at certain positions, everything else should be okay. But I mean, if you're trying to start Gerald Everett or, I mean, Jack Doyle, I mean, you could luck into a guy like Ryan Griffin, absolutely, and that's kind of one of those examples where streaming can work. But I don't know, man, especially after this season, I'd be just as fine, like, trying to maybe after this season look at a Mark Andrews or try and find a Darren Waller or even Dallas Goedert, like, that might be a stretch.
I mean, and going back to Jeremy's comment, it may make sense to start just drafting one a little bit earlier, because it's a hell of a lot easier to find a streaming wide receiver as your wide receiver 3 or a flex than it is to find a streaming tight end. Because, again, who do you count on when they're 50% consistent? Do you pick up Kyle Rudolph because last week he had 2 touchdowns in a game, and then start him the next week and he gets 3 points? I mean, that's the kind of stuff you run into.
I'm not smart enough to figure it out either. And even at running back, if you think about it, you can have – I mean, there's always the next guy up at running back. And as long as they get the the carries, as long as they get the snaps, they're going to get you points. I cannot tell you whether Eric Ebron, Ryan Griffin, or Jack Doyle is going to score more points this week. I have no clue.
Well, and the other tough part about this year is the fact that so many of these guys that were drafted as a tight end one are miserably failing. O.J. Howard, Delaney Walker, Jimmy Graham, Kyle Rudolph, Jared Cook, Greg Olsen,
Vance McDonald.
All of these guys were up in that top 15 tight ends that you thought you could rely on them. And you put some draft capital in getting them the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th round, which is decent. If you got lucky, you got Darren Waller or Mark Andrews later. But, that's only two teams out of the 12. So, all right, we got less than a minute. So I hate to cut you off, but I just want to make sure you guys get your say in. So you got 30 seconds each. Just kind of, I'll start with you, Jeremy. Just kind of drop where you're at, where everybody can find you, your Twitter, and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, I'm the Dynasty Madman. You can find me on Twitter at DFF_Madman. The big thing for me is I co-host at Dynasty Trades HQ, trade show, Dynasty Leagues. We have a lot of fun over there. Give it a listen if you haven't. Editor at Devy Watch, and a stalwart, one of the original guys at Dynasty Football Factory, where I do some writing and help out. And that's where the podcast Trades HQ is.
All right, Chris, he only left you 10 seconds. Hit it.
4for4, NumberFire. Find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX. So come yell at me if you find anything wrong that I've said tonight.
All right, Jeremy, Chris, thank you so much for joining. We'll see you guys.
We know the joy of giving is its own reward. But who says you can't get something for yourself, too? Now when you buy Vanilla MasterCard gift cards, you can enter to win one of over 10 prizes every week for 10 weeks, including a grand prize of $10,000 in Vanilla gift cards. So, get gifting and start sharing the delight for more chances to win. Go to get-gifting.com to learn more and enter for your chance to win. Cards are issued by the Bancorp Bank and MetaBank, members FDIC, pursuant to license by MasterCard International Incorporated, and may be used in the U.S. everywhere debit MasterCard is accepted. Terms and conditions apply. Cards distributed and serviced by Income Financial Services, Inc., which is licensed as a money transmitter by the New York State Department of Financial Services, and MLS ID number 912772.
Excuse me, Captain. This is your wake-up call from the new TracFone Wireless.
What's that now?
What if you had to fly this plane while sitting back in the cabin?
I wouldn't have any control.
Well, that's what it's like going with some wireless companies, but TracFone Wireless gives you control. Get unlimited talk and text on America's best 4G LTE network starting at $20 a month, no contract. Plus, unlimited carryover data with active service.
That's cool, but how'd you get in my cockpit?
This is your wake-up call, people. The new TracFone Wireless. Now you're in control. See terms and conditions at TracFone.com.